I pushed through the crowded door into the Ladyboy Lounge at 2 a.m., the neon lights slicing across every face, as I gripped my whiskey glass and scanned the room until I found Dara leaning against the bar, her smile soft in the harsh glow. "I've been waiting," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. She tipped her head and leaned closer, breath warm against my ear. "Forever, I promise," she whispered, and my heart thundered in my chest with a hope I hadn't felt since my wife passed. Ben yelled from across the room, "Here's to new beginnings, Mike." And I lifted my glass toward him, smiling wider than I have in years. I settled onto the bar stool beside Dara while she reached for my hand, fingers light as silk as she said, "Tell me about Seattle." I paused, choosing my words. "Gray skies," I said, voice rough. "Rain that never quits. Memories everywhere I look." She squeezed my hand and said, "You deserve sunshine." A laugh bubbled up inside. Me, half joy, half disbelief. "Then I found you," I said, and she laughed, low and comforting. I watched her laugh lines, the curve of her cheek catching the neon. The room smelled of perfume and stale beer. I asked, "Why do you listen to an old man?" She tilted her head, eyes bright. "Because you speak from your heart," she said, softly. My throat closed. I cleared it. "I haven't spoken from here in a long time." She nodded, tracing my knuckles with her thumb. "I'm here now." The weight of her words pressed against my ribs. I leaned in. "When did you learn English so well?" She hesitated, lips parting like she might lie, then said, "A friend taught me. I wanted to share your world." I relaxed. "Thank you." In that moment the music swelled and she lifted her glass to mine. The clink felt hopeful. "To us," I said, and she echoed, "To us." Between sips I told her about my wife's laugh, how it used to fill the kitchen every morning, and how empty my house felt when she went. Dara ran her finger along the rim of her glass. "You're brave," she said. "I'm scared." I admitted, and she shook her head. "Scared can't stop you now." I squeezed her hand. Ben raised his voice again. "Mike, your tab's growing. Are you buying the club now?" I glanced at our drinks and laughed, a raw sound I hardly recognized. "Tonight, she's worth every baht." Dara's laughter joined mine. A server dropped off a plate of fried noodles between us. I tasted mine, but my mind was on her soft voice. "You like spicy?" she asked cheekily. I chewed quickly and choked down the heat. "I'll do anything for you." She rolled her eyes and smiled. "I know." Something flickered in her expression. Was it doubt? I forced down a swallow of whiskey. She tilted her head. "How long will you stay in Pattaya?" I sighed. "As long as it takes to heal." She reached across the plate and touched my wrist. "Healing takes time." I nodded, staring at her hand. "I don't want to be alone." Her eyes softened. "You're not alone." My chest ached with relief. We sat in silence while the music pulsed. I studied her profile, eyelashes dark, lips curved, and felt a surge of protectiveness. "May? I call you May," I asked, and she laughed. "Everyone does," I grinned. "Then May." She tapped my fingers and sipped her drink. I asked, "Your real name?" She paused like it might matter too much, then whispered, "Titima." I nodded. Titima. The name rolled off my tongue. I felt older and lighter at once. Ben slid onto the stool beside me and clapped my shoulder. "Good choice, old friend." I smiled, but inside something tightened. That night I thought anything was possible. We danced to a slow song under the neon haze. I held her close, feeling the smooth warmth of her body against mine, whispering how her laughter was my new sun. She pressed her cheek to mine and murmured, "I've never felt this safe." My heart swelled. I whispered back, "I promise I'll keep you safe." Her breath stuttered. I pulled back to look at her eyes. "Did I say something wrong?" She shook her head, voice soft. "No, only that I trust you." I smiled, wanting to believe it with everything inside me. As the song ended, I slipped money into her hand, saying, "For your next ride home." She blinked at me. I live here. Heat rose to my cheeks. Old habits. She laughed, brushing my arm. Old habits aren't bad when they keep you safe. I released a breath I didn't know I held. I ordered 2 more whiskeys and watched her drink from mine once. I told her, I've never felt this alive. She leaned in, lips grazing my ear, and you won't feel any other way with me. I closed my eyes. In that moment, I believed her. I believed you could find love after 60. I believed a man could start over in a country where he knew nothing. I believed in the promise, of her voice and the feel of her hand in mine. When Ben finally yelled, "Last call, Mike!" I sighed, hung my glass on the bar and turned to her. "Let's go," I said. She grabbed my arm and together we walked into Pattaya's neon night, 2 silhouettes against the glow. Hoping forever wasn't just a word. I remember that humid evening on the beach like a heartbeat I never wanted to end, sitting on rickety wooden stools at Somchai's beachfront bar, where the salt spray mixed with the sweet scent of mango smoothies he slid across the counter. And I said, "These are incredible," while Dara laughed, her laughter soft but genuine like a gentle wave lapping at my soul. And she brushed a loose strand of hair from her face and said, "My dream is to study design in Bangkok." Her eyes bright with hope, and I felt a surge of warmth because I too was hoping for a fresh start after Mara's funeral back home in Seattle. But I didn't say that yet. Instead I asked, "Design?" And she nodded, voice steady. "Yes, I sketch clothes and furniture for friends, then I send photos online. One day I want my own shop." I took a slow sip of the icy smoothie, its sweetness making me close my eyes, and said, "I believe you will." Heart swelling in my chest, and her hand touched mine, fingers light as silk, as she said, "Thank you." And I realized that no one had ever thanked me like that for believing in them, not even Mara. And I watched her smile in the flickering light of a lone tiki torch, feeling my defenses melt. Then the sky lit up with fireworks over Pattaya Bay, bright pink and gold bursts that reflected in Dara's eyes. And I whispered, "I haven't felt this alive in years." And she lowered her head, thumb brushing my palm. "You deserve to feel alive." And I remembered Ben's warning earlier. Take it slow, Mike, but I had already sped past caution when I booked my flight to Thailand, chased by grief I couldn't outrun. Somchai reappeared carrying plates of grilled squid, sizzling with chili, and Dara said, "Try this," offering me a piece. And I said, "Only if you promise to taste mine," grinning at her. And she laughed, a rich musical sound that echoed off the water and said, "Deal," dipping my squid into lime juice before popping it in my mouth, eyes twinkling as I coughed from the spice, and she patted my back. "Spicy?" I managed between coughs, tears in my eyes from the heat and from the joy of her concern. "Worth every bite," I said, and she smiled wider. I leaned back, studying the curve of her cheek in the torchlight, thinking how easy it was to tell her things I'd kept locked inside for years, so I said, "I lost my wife 2 years ago," voice low, and Dara's expression softened. "I'm so sorry," and I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. "I came here to heal, not to break again," and she squeezed my hand and said, "Healing sometimes starts with a risk." And I felt a shiver because those words sounded like a promise. She hesitated, then asked quietly, "Why are you here with me?" My chest tightened as I answered, "Because talking to you feels like visiting a part of my heart I'd forgotten was alive." And she lowered her gaze, cheeks flushing. "I feel the same with you." And the sincerity in her voice made my eyes sting. Ben's shout broke through. "Mike, you owe Somchai a fortune already." And I laughed, rapping my knuckles on the bar. "All of it's on me." And Somchai grinned from behind the counter, nodding in approval before disappearing into the dimly lit kitchen. I turned back to Dara. "It's nothing," I said. But inside I wondered how much I'd spent, and whether nostalgia for home had cost me my sense. I took her free hand and asked, "Have you ever trusted someone so quickly before?" She blinked, gaze distant. "Once," she whispered. My heart caught. "With someone back home?" She nodded, voice tight. "He promised forever too." My chest constricted. I swallowed hard and said, "Did he break his promise?" She looked down at our entwined hands. "He left when I needed him most." I felt a pang of protectiveness. "I won't do that," I told her, voice thick. She met my eyes, small tears glistening. "I hope not." The air between us hummed with tension and longing as another round of fireworks blasted overhead, and I asked, "Do you trust me now?" She hesitated, then said, "I want to," and I nodded, though a small knot of doubt twisted in my gut. Did I deserve her trust? "Then let's build it together," I said, voice firm. She smiled softly, leaning her head on my shoulder as we watched the sparkles fade over the water. I recalled how Ben told me loneliness could kill a man, but fear couldn't keep me from reaching for something real. "Tell me more about Bangkok," I urged, and she spoke of towering markets and colorful fabrics, pointing toward the city in the distance. I said, "I'll be there soon," and she gripped my shirt, eyes shining, "Only if you're really staying for good." My pulse quickened at her challenge. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, conviction ringing in my chest, though I hadn't planned beyond tonight. She leaned up and kissed my cheek, soft and brief, just a brush of her lips. But it sent an electric charge through me, and I whispered, "You're incredible," and she laughed against my ear. Our conversation drifted to small things, favorite foods, old movies, the best beaches. But every word, every laugh, every silence wove us closer together until I believed, truly believed, that love after 60 could be real. When Somchai called, last orders, Dara stood and offered me her hand. "Come walk with me," she said, and I rose, heart pounding. We strolled along the water's edge, our footprints trailing behind like memories we'd leave in the sand. She asked, "What do you see in me?" I paused, inhaled the salty air and said, "A light I thought I'd lost forever." She stopped, turning to face me, eyes wide. I reached for her hand again. "May we find it together?" She smiled through tears and nodded. Together. Fireworks burst one final time, reflecting in the tide as we walked back to Somchai's bar, hand in hand, two souls daring to hope under Pattaya's neon sky, believing forever could begin, with a single yes. I began covering every expense without hesitation, taxis from my condo to the city center, dinners under the flickering lanterns, even Dara's airport transfers when she flew back to Bangkok, because every baht felt like an investment in her smile. "Thank you, my friend," Dara said one evening as we stepped out of the tuk-tuk, her voice soft in the humid air. I nodded, heart warm, and later told Ben over cold Singer beers, "I'd do anything for her smile." He raised an eyebrow. "Ease up, Mike, you're draining your wallet." I waved off his warning. "She deserves it." But sometimes I caught Dara glancing at her phone at odd hours, 1 a.m., 3 a.m., and I reminded myself she was helping family. "It's just family business," I told Ben. Then one night Dara's text appeared. "I have urgent bills, please help." My chest tightened as I reread the request. Then I tapped back, "Tell me how much." She sent a number that made my stomach lurch. I tossed my wallet on the table and said, "Consider it done." The next evening she slipped the cash back into my hand with a hopeful smile. "You're too kind," she whispered. I blushed. "I'm happy to help." That felt right, until I watched her stare at her phone instead of at me. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she murmured, but her eyes avoided mine. I swallowed doubts but shoved them aside because I wanted to believe. "Do you want to meet my sister?" she asked later at dinner. "With pleasure," I answered, picturing laughter in her family home. Then at 2 a.m. I saw a message preview from a contact named Nong, asking if she'd finished work. I convinced myself Nong was her childhood nickname. When I mentioned it to Ben, he shook his head. "That doesn't add up, Mike." I forced a grin. "I know, my lady." Yet the knot in my gut tightened. Days later, she invited me to a side street house. "My family," she began, but the porch was deserted. "They moved," Dara said, voice quick. "I'm sorry I lied." My chest collapsed. "Embarrassed," I whispered. She wove her fingers through mine. "I was scared you'd leave." "I'm here," I said, voice trembling. She shook her head. I know, but I panicked. I felt my heart splinter, her half-truths cutting deeper than absence. 2 nights later, Ben cornered me at the bar. "You're pouring money into her pockets," he said, urgency in his eyes. "I can't help her if I go broke," he warned. "I want to help," I insisted, "because she means something to me." Ben ran a hand through his hair. "Just be careful." I nodded, but fear buzzed beneath my ribs. That same evening, Dara arrived at my condo carrying a sack of mangoes. "Your favorite," she said with a small smile. I watched her place them on the table and felt the old ache of hope. "Why the mangoes?" I asked. She bit her lip. "I'm sorry." Her eyes glistened. "I want to make up for lying." My chest felt tight. "I'm hurt," I said, voice low. She pressed my arm. "Please forgive me." I closed my eyes. "I need honesty." She nodded fiercely. "I will try." I exhaled, voice soft. "I need more than promises." She looked down. "I know." I left the room and returned with 2 fresh banknotes. "Here," I said, sliding them toward her. "No strings." Her shame mixed with relief. She reached for my hand. "Thank you." I believed her again, despite the nagging doubt, because love demanded faith, and I was tired of doubting my own heart. When she kissed my cheek, brief and warm, I whispered, "You're incredible." She smiled, and I meant it. Our dates continued, cruising on a chartered longtail boat, eating papaya salad at a roadside stall, wandering night markets under lantern light. And every time she said, "My friend," I felt a pang. One night, over grilled squid and ice-cold beer, I asked gently, "Why won't you call me anything but friend?" Dara stared at her drink. After a moment she said, "I'm scared to call you something else." My heart thudded. "Scared of what?" She met my gaze, voice trembling. "Of losing you." I reached across the table. "You won't lose me." But I realized then that fear had already driven her to lies. I swallowed. "I need more than half-truths." She exhaled, tears shining. "I know." I squeezed her hand. "Then, show me." She nodded, voice small. "I will." The next morning I sat outside my condo, replaying her words as sunlight chased away the stars. Doubt shadowed every memory of her gratitude, smiles, and my open wallet. I closed my eyes and admitted to myself I wanted to trust more than anything. But trust needed truth. As the tuk-tuk rattled by, I made a choice, to believe her final promise or to protect my heart before it broke again. I rose, folded my money carefully, and headed to the beach, resolved that real love couldn't bloom on lies, and that I would find out soon if I had been right to keep giving my all. I woke before dawn to an empty bed, my hand grazing cool sheets, where Dara's warmth should have been, and a jolt of panic drove me upright, eyes locking on the bare space beside me and then the nightstand. My wallet had vanished, and with it, my passport, the tiny booklet I needed to leave this country. I crept across the tile floor, voice tight in my throat as I called, "Dara." Only silence greeted me in the half-lit condo, and I recalled every small slip I'd brushed aside. The silk dress she borrowed for dinner that never reappeared in the closet, her whispered phone calls at midnight she'd said were family matters, the way she flinched when I reached for her hand too quickly. But I'd chalked it up to shyness or stress, telling myself her gratitude was enough to excuse those moments. I flung open drawers, chest pounding, searching for any sign of her. Empty shelves, rumpled sheets, a single hairpin on the floor, and my mind raced in the darkness while my hands trembled, and I dialed her number 4 times before it went to voicemail. "Sorry, I can't answer right now. Please leave a message." And I fisted the phone, knuckles white, as fear and shame collided in my chest, whispering that I'd paid too much, cared too deeply for someone who might have been a stranger all along. I ran into the hallway in my socks, shouting her name while neighbors slept behind closed doors, my voice echoing in the still building, and when the security guard peeked around the corner, I just waved him off before bolting into a waiting tuk-tuk, rattling down empty streets toward the scooter shop she'd bought last week, hoping for answers. The driver asked, "You looking for her scooter?" And I barely nodded before blurting, "Oh, where is it?" And the dealer cocked his head, pointing to an empty rack where her scooter should have been, voice flat as he said, "Sold yesterday. Family emergency." And I stared, disbelief burning hotter than the engine's exhaust, my fists clenching on the seat as I pressed him. "Family emergency?" He shrugged. "That's what she said." And I sank against the chassis, chest tight, the word family hollow in my ears. And when I asked for a photo of the buyer, he said there wasn't one, shaking his head before the driver nudged me. Back in the tuk-tuk, concern in his eyes, but I said nothing. My thoughts looping through moments I'd ignored. Her quick smile when I handed over cash. Her "thank you" so soft I'd felt it in my bones, each baht I'd given feeling like proof of my worth, proof that love could be bought. I replayed the night she'd asked for 2,000 baht for urgent bills, how I laughed to Ben, anything for her smile, and how proud I'd felt that evening, chest expanded with purpose, until this morning stripped that illusion away. Back at the condo, I found the manager waiting by the door, broom in hand, eyes sympathetic but professional, saying, "I called you earlier, sir." No answer. I nodded, throat raw, and she offered, "I can help search if you want." And I forced a grateful smile. "No, thank you. I've done enough damage." Inside, the empty silence pressed in. I opened my laptop to her last messages. Short notes. Thanking me for bills paid. Smiles sent via emoji. Promises of meeting later. And stared at the screen, each word now a razor I'd stepped on. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, passport case in my lap, mind replaying the gentle, "I love you, my friend," she'd whispered the night before as I dropped her off after dinner, her head resting on my shoulder in the back of a taxi. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice in the dark. "You make me feel safe." My chest fractured with guilt, safe until the second I needed her. I slid down until my knees hit my chin, recalling how her phone buzzed with messages from Nong at 3 a.m. after our dinner date. How I'd joked, "You have a secret admirer," and she'd laughed but checked the screen anyway, thumb flicking over words I could never read. I'd told myself it was normal, family or friend, but now I knew it was a warning I chose to ignore. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I froze, convinced it was her, but Ben's name flashed on the screen. I answered, voice breaking, "Ben." And he sighed. "I saw the scooter deal. Are you okay?" I shook my head, though he couldn't see me. "She's gone, and so is my passport." He whispered, "Shit. Did you call the embassy?" I pressed my forehead to the cool wall. "No." Fear tightened its grip. "I'll help." I exhaled. "I don't know who she is." He said, "Then start with the embassy." I hung up and stared at the door as sunlight crept through the window, biting my lip to keep from crying out. After a moment I rose, passport case in hand, and headed to the front desk. "I need to report a theft," I said, voice steady though every breath shook. The manager led me to a small office. I filled out the form, fingerprints and all, and handed it over, saying, "She took my wallet, my passport, maybe more." She nodded sympathetically. "I'll send you copies." I thanked her and left, stepping back into the corridor where my footsteps sounded too loud. Outside, the morning air felt heavy, and I wandered toward the beach, hoping the sea might wash away shame, but my mind spun. I'd ignored the flinches, the secretive glances, the borrowed dress that never returned. I realized I'd been a fool, falling for gratitude and promises, mistaking currency for connection. At the water's edge, I sank onto a driftwood log, passport case closed on my knees, and whispered to the waves, "I loved you, Dara," catching my breath in the empty sunrise. Then I spoke louder, for no one to hear. "But I won't let this break me," because as my tears vanished into the tide, I resolved that this heartbreak would not be my end, only the beginning of a truth I'd been afraid to face. I spent the next 48 hours chasing shadows of Dara through the city, starting before dawn with a police report in hand, and a local cop staring at me in concern as he said, "We'll look into it." His sympathy a thin salve for my panic, and then I walked out into the humid morning to dial the number she'd given for her sister, Nock. "Please tell me she's safe," I pleaded, and Nock's voice crackled through the crackling line. "Dara is safe." But she didn't mention my missing money or passport, and I demanded, "Where is she?" only to hear silence before the line went dead, leaving me swinging between brief hope and raw dread. I raced to every bar where Dara might have performed: Neon Nights, Sapphire Lounge, Moonlight Cabaret, sliding my last photo of her across cigarette-stained tables to baffled managers who shook their heads and said, "No Dara here," before I stumbled out into the sticky air, chest heaving. I replayed every moment I'd ignored. The borrowed dress never returned. Her whispered phone calls she claimed were family emergencies, her distant eyes when I reached for her hand. And tears stung my eyes as I woke each night on a wooden bench beneath my condo, back aching and stomach twisting, replaying my own blind trust like a broken record. At midnight I dialed Ben and choked out, "I'm losing my mind," and he advised embassy help, but fear and regret pinned me to the bench, and in the morning I called knock again, hands trembling. "Which friends is she with?" And she sighed. "Friends in Bangkok," but refused details, leaving me reeling. Desperate, I scoured street markets at dawn, asking every vendor and tuk-tuk driver if they'd seen her, each shake of the head hammering my hope. I spent an afternoon in a cramped cafe, nursing cold coffee while I dialed everyone in her phone book, her landlord, her tailor, the massage parlor, and each unanswered call felt like another betrayal. At dusk, I flagged down a passing officer and begged, "Please help me find her," and he offered to check CCTV for a fee, so I emptied my remaining baht for grainy footage, in which I searched blurred figures for her silhouette, clinging to a ghost on a screen as if my sanity depended on it. By the following dawn, I'd slept 2 hours on the bench, and Knock's morning text arrived. "I heard from a friend. Dara's safe. Please don't worry." Relief flickered, then died when I noticed no mention of my passport or money, and I typed back, "Where is she?" But she didn't reply. I wandered Pattaya Road, stomach knotted, replaying her gentle thank yous as I paid bill after bill, wondering if gratitude had been her weapon all along. I approached a street performer who'd introduced me to Dara, voice raw. "Have us? You seen her?" And he shook his head before pointing down, so I ate, and I sprinted that narrow lane, adrenaline propelling me until my legs buckled and I dropped to the curb, phone trembling as I called embassy, police, anyone who might help. Strangers offered water and soft condolences. "I'm sorry, man." But their pity washed over me, useless against my panic. A local cop found me slumped by a food stall and handed me water, murmuring, "You look like hell," before promising to keep searching bars, and I thanked him, swallowing shame with each gulp. That night I dialed Knock one last time, voice quivering. "Please tell me the truth," and she whispered, "She needs time," before hanging up, and the emptiness inside me mirrored the silent street. I trekked back to my condo, legs like lead, and stared at the empty suite. No dress, no suitcase, no wallet or passport, only my scarf and the echo of her voice telling me I made her feel safe. I sank to the floor, passport case in my lap, mind spinning with regret as I whispered, "I should have seen the signs," and I pressed my back to the cool wall, tears slipping down my cheeks, heart pounding with the cost of my blind faith. In that moment I resolved that I wouldn't stop until I knew her truth, even if pursuing it broke me completely. I sit at the bar late into the night, staring at the empty stool where Dara once rested her head against my shoulder, and I speak, aloud to the silent room. I lost $8,000, my passport and my dignity, my voice trembling so badly the glass in my hand rattles. And I replay every moment I ignored my own instincts. When I handed her baht for bills I hadn't questioned, when I laughed off Ben's cautionary words, "Mike, slow down, you're spending too much," and when I brushed aside the dollops of doubt creeping into my mind like unwelcome guests. I recall the silk dress she borrowed that never returned to my closet, her midnight calls she claimed were family emergencies, and the way she flinched whenever I reached to hold her hand too tightly. And I realize I wanted her gratitude more than I wanted her honesty, and I whisper, I wanted love more than truth, as if saying it will somehow change my past. But the barkeep slides me another beer and the new regulars laugh in the background, trying to distract me with chatter about the latest football scores and local gossip. And Ben sits down beside me, clapping me on the back, saying, "Let's paint your condo tomorrow, erase every trace of her glitter." And I nod, tears blurring the neon lights, because I understand I need to reclaim my space and my self-respect, even though it hurts, and I recall how I handed a paint roller to the new bar regulars last weekend, their jokes echoing off freshly coated walls as we slapped on a coat of calm grey over the pink where her name was scribbled, and I felt each stroke scraping away pieces of denial. I tell the bartender, I won't be buying anyone else's. Silence with cash ever again. And his nod is gentle, but I know he hears the finality in my words. As laughter drifts from a nearby table, I remember how I laughed too, how easy it was to let joy replace caution, and I confess to the empty seat. Every laugh cost me, but it taught me to laugh at myself next time. And Ben raises his glass. I take a slow sip of beer, feeling the bitterness anchor me in my new reality. I think about the text Knock sent, "She's safe, please heal." And I realize I've begun healing by accepting the cost of my blind faith, not by chasing revenge or confrontation, and I murmur, I'm done chasing ghosts, because the only ghost I need to face is the one in the mirror, reminding me of the man I used to be. The regulars press another round of drinks on me, attempting camaraderie, but I push one back and say, not tonight, thanks, feeling the first flicker of clear-headed resolve. I lean forward and tell Ben, voice low, I painted over her name yesterday, and he grins. Feels good? I nod, shoulders heavier yet lighter. It's the first time I've touched anything without thinking of her, I admit, and he rests his hand on mine. That's progress. I glance at my reflection in the dark window, tracing the lines of fatigue and resolve, and realize that accepting responsibility means allowing myself to rebuild, brick by careful brick, rather than plaster over the cracks with money, as the bar's neon sign flickers off for last call. I stand, sliding my stool back under the counter, and I say softly, I'm ready to go home. Not to the US yet, but to the quiet space inside my own heart where I can start anew. Ben stands with me, slinging an arm around my shoulder, and we step into the humid night, laughter fading behind us, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own footsteps and the silent promise of a fresh coat of paint waiting in my condo, an altar to lessons learned and dignity reclaimed, and as we walk under the streetlights, I whisper to the empty stool now covered in grey paint, thank you for teaching me the price of blind trust, and I finally feel the weight lift, because in the quiet reckoning of loss and reflection, I have found the first glimmer of self-respect, guiding me forward. I stand on my balcony at dawn, clutching a cup of plain coffee as the city awakens beneath a pale sky, and I breathe in the silence. No laughter, no promises, only the gentle hum of early traffic, and I say, I'm still lonely, but I've learned to be okay with my own company, because I no longer chase whispers in neon bars or count baht for smiles that vanish by sunrise, and I let the steam curl into the cool air as I recall Dara's laugh echoing off these same streets, and how I once believed forever could be bought by the hour. I lift my cup and speak to the viewer, voice calm. No more empty vows, only honesty from now on. Then I glance at the freshly painted grey walls behind me, each brushstroke a reminder that I repainted my life to remove her glitter and half-truths. I turn my gaze east toward distant hills and say, next month I'm booking a bus to Chiang Rai. I'll explore Thailand on my terms, picturing mist-shrouded rice terraces and markets alive with scent and sound, where I'll carry only my own hopes, not the weight of someone else's needs. I press the cup to my lips and let the warmth settle in my chest, thinking how this journey began in heartbreak, but has led me here, standing alone, yet not afraid. I tell myself, I'll keep her memory as a lesson, not a wound, because every regret taught me something essential about trust and self-worth, and I feel the tightness of grief loosen with each honest breath. I place the empty cup on the railing, knuckles brushing its chipped edge as if touching the past, and whisper, thank you for the lesson, Dara, before I turn away from the balcony, stepping inside to pack a small bag, choosing only the essentials, clothes, my journal, that bird pendant Mara gave me, and I pause to look at the empty suite one last time, grateful for its quiet refuge and the chance to start anew. I zip my bag and lift it over my shoulder, heart steady with cautious hope as I cross the threshold out of the condo, closing the door softly behind me, and I step onto the street, the morning light soft on my face, ready for the next chapter. knowing I'll never forget the pain that brought me here, but certain that honesty, my own and others, will guide me forward.